I stood at the door of the salon I had built with my own hands for 31 years, and my son-in-law told me I wasn't welcome inside. Not in those exact words, he was too smart for that. He said, "This isn't a good time, Shirley." He said it quietly, with that tight little smile he always had, the one that made you feel like you were the problem for even showing up. I said, "My name is on the lease." He said, "We know." That was it. That was all I got. My daughter appeared behind him in the doorway for just a second, long enough for me to see her face, and then she stepped back into the shadow of the and disappeared. The smell of acetone and warm wax drifted out past him. I had breathed that smell every day for 3 decades, and now I was standing on the wrong side of the door. I didn't beg. I turned around, walked back to my car, and sat there for a long time with my hands in my lap. I want to tell this story from the beginning because if I just tell you the end, you'll think I'm exaggerating. You'll think no daughter does this to a mother. I thought that too, once. I came to Canada from Trinidad in 1981. I was 23 years old and I had $60 in my purse and the name of a woman in Scarborough who said I could sleep on her couch until I found work. I found work. I cleaned offices at night and styled hair on weekends out of that woman's kitchen. By 1985, I had my first chair in a proper salon. By 1992, I had my own place, a small unit in a strip mall in Brampton, Ontario, 4 chairs, 2 wash stations, a back room that smelled like damp towels and hair relaxer. It was not glamorous. I mopped the floor myself every night. I did the bookkeeping at my kitchen table after my daughter was in bed. Her name is Tyla. She was born in 1986, and she grew up between those 4 chairs doing her homework on the reception desk after school while I finished the last client of the day. I don't say this to make myself sound noble. I say it because I want you to understand what the salon was. It wasn't just a business. It was the thing I had made out of nothing. Every piece of equipment in it I had paid for. The mirrors, the chairs, the shelving my late husband Earl put up himself in 1994. Earl passed in 2011. After that, it was just me and Tyla, and by then Tyla was an adult with her own life, and the salon kept me sane. When she was 25, she met a man named Preston at a wedding in Mississauga. I'm not going to speak badly about him without cause because in the beginning I had no cause. He was pleasant enough, polite to my face. He worked in finance, something to do with commercial lending, and he had that particular kind of confidence that comes with earning good money young. He wasn't unkind to Tyla, or if he was, I didn't see it then. They got married in 2014. Nice wedding held at a venue in Burlington. I paid for part of it, not all of it. Preston's family contributed as well, but I paid what I could, which was around $18,000 drawn from the business account and my personal savings combined. I didn't mind. I wanted her to have the wedding she wanted. What I did mind, though I didn't say so at the time, was the way things shifted after the wedding. Small things at first. Tyla stopped dropping by the salon on Saturday afternoons the way she used to. She stopped calling on Sunday mornings. When I called her, she would answer, but she sounded distracted, slightly impatient, as if my call had interrupted something important. I told myself this was normal. She was building a life with her husband. That was how it was supposed to go. But then there were other things. The first Christmas after the wedding, Preston's family came up from Toronto for dinner at their house in Oakville. They had bought a house in Oakville, I should mention, a very nice house with a finished basement and a 2-car garage and granite countertops in the kitchen, and I was invited, but I was invited for dessert, not dinner. Dessert. Tyla called on the 23rd and said, "Mom, would it be okay if you came around 7? We're doing dinner just with his family, and then it gets more relaxed after." I said, of course, no problem, and I hung up, and I sat in my kitchen in Brampton, and I cried quietly into a dish towel for about 10 minutes. Then I washed my face and got on with it. I am telling you this because I want you to see how it builds. It's not one big moment. It's 100 small moments, each easy to explain away. She's busy. He likes things a certain way. I'm being too sensitive. They have their own traditions now. In 2019, Tyla came to me with a proposal. She sat across from me at my kitchen table, the same table where I'd done the salon's books for 20 years, and she spread out papers and said she'd been thinking. The salon was doing well, but I was 61 years old and running it alone was a lot, and she had been taking business courses part-time, and she and Preston thought it would be a good opportunity. She wanted to take over day-to-day management. She had ideas about rebranding, expanding services, maybe bringing in a second location eventually. Her face was bright in a way I hadn't seen in years. She seemed genuinely excited. I want to be honest, I was not suspicious. I was moved. My daughter, who had grown up in that salon, who had done her grade 8 science project at the reception desk, she wanted to carry it forward. I thought this was what inheritance was supposed to look like. We went to a lawyer in Brampton. We drew up an agreement. I retained ownership. The deed, the lease, the business registration. Everything stayed in my name. What we transferred was operational control. Taylor would manage staff, handle day-to-day finances, and receive a salary. I would stay on as owner and silent partner, checking in monthly. The lawyer, an older Jamaican man who had done legal work for me since 2003, read the agreement twice and asked me if I was sure. I said yes, I was sure. It worked for a while. Tylee was energetic and capable. She hired 2 new stylists, refreshed the interior, switched the booking system to an app. Clients liked her. Revenue went up in 2020 and 2021, though of course 2020 was complicated for everyone. During the COVID lockdowns, Tylee kept things going as best she could, applied for the Canada Emergency Business Account loan, navigated the closures. I was grateful, I told her so. Preston started coming around more in 2021. Not to help, he didn't do anything in the salon, but to have conversations with Taylor in the back room with the door closed. I noticed this when I came by on a Tuesday in November to drop off some documents. I could hear voices but not words. When I knocked, there was a brief silence before Taylor opened the door and said, "Oh, Mom, sorry, we were just going over some numbers." Preston smiled at me from behind her. I remember thinking, going over what numbers? With him? He was in commercial lending, not hair care, but I said nothing. I took my documents out of my bag and left them on the desk and drove home. The change in Tylee happened slowly and then all at once. That's the only way I can describe it. By early 2022, she had stopped calling me with updates about the salon unless I asked directly. When I dropped by, she was always in the middle of something. When I asked about the monthly financials, which I was entitled to see as the owner, she would say she'd send them, and then she would send them a week late or in a format that was hard to read, or with a note saying things were complicated right now and she'd explain later. Once I came by on a Saturday afternoon, not my scheduled day, I'll admit, but I hadn't heard from her in almost 2 weeks, and the new young woman at the front desk looked at me with what I can only describe as a trained expression, a practiced neutrality. She said, "I'll let Taylor know you're here," and disappeared into the back. She was in there for a long time. When she came back, she said Taylor was with a client and would I like to wait or would I prefer to come back another time? In my own salon, would I prefer to come back another time? I waited. Tyler came out 20 minutes later, her expression pleasant but tight, and kissed my cheek and said, "Mom, I wasn't expecting you." And Preston was with her. I don't know where he had come from. I hadn't seen him arrive, but there he was, standing slightly behind her, his hand at the small of her back. I asked about the financials. Taylor glanced at Preston. Preston said, "We've been restructuring some things. We'll have a cleaner picture in a few weeks." I said I'd like to see what was current, whatever they had. There was a pause. Taylor said she'd email me. She didn't email me. I went back to my lawyer. His name is Calvin now. I'm sorry, he passed in 2020, and I have a new lawyer, a younger woman out of Mississauga who had been recommended to me by a client. Her name doesn't matter. What matters is what she found when she started making inquiries. Tyler and Preston had approached a commercial real estate firm in mid-2021 about a potential sale of the salon property. The lease was in my name, the business registration was in my name. None of this should have been possible without my signature, but Preston worked in commercial lending. He knew people, and somewhere in the shuffle of the COVID period, when I had signed documents digitally without always reading them as carefully as I should have, amended lease renewals, SEBA documentation, updated business registration forms, my lawyer found buried in a package I had signed in October 2021, a limited power of attorney. I do not remember signing it. I'm not saying I didn't sign it. I had signed many things that year. Everyone had signed many things that year, but I did not understand what I was signing, and I do not believe I was told. The document granted Tyler authority to act on my behalf in matters related to the business, including property transactions, for a period of 2 years. Preston had drafted it. That was what my lawyer confirmed after 6 weeks of back and forth with the other firm's solicitors. When I found out, I didn't cry. I want to be clear about that. I had already done my crying. I had cried in November when my own receptionist asked if I'd prefer to come back another time. I had cried in January when Tyler didn't call on my birthday until 9 o'clock at night. By the time I sat across from my lawyer and she slid that document across the desk and said, "Shirley, I need you to look at this." I was past crying. "I was somewhere quieter than that," she explained the situation. The power of attorney had been used, once in March 2022, to submit a letter of intent to the commercial real estate firm, expressing willingness to enter negotiations for the sale of the lease and business assets. The letter had my name on it. I had not written it. Here is what I need you to understand about Canadian law, because I want this to be clear. A power of attorney obtained through misrepresentation, where the grantor did not understand what they were signing, can be challenged. It is not a simple process. It takes time and money and documentation, but it is possible. My lawyer began that process in April 2022. I did not tell Taylor, I did not tell Preston I needed time, and I needed them not to move any faster than they already had. The call came on a Wednesday morning in June. My lawyer, she said the firm's solicitors had reviewed our challenge and acknowledged certain procedural irregularities. She said, and I want to remember this exactly, "Surely they've agreed to withdraw. The letter of intent is void. And there's something else." She paused. The real estate firm's compliance team flagged the file internally. Because of the nature of the discrepancy between the power of attorney and the original ownership documentation, they reported it to the Law Society. There may be professional consequences for the lawyer who prepared that document. I put the phone down on the kitchen table for a moment. I looked out the window at my backyard. Earl had planted a rose bush along the fence in 1998, and somehow it still came back every spring, even now, even without him. I picked the phone back up and said, "What do I do next?" She told me. I went to the Salon on a Thursday afternoon with two things: my lawyer's letter confirming ownership and the void of the letter of intent, and the original signed lease agreement with my name on it. I had my lawyer's assistant with me as a witness. I had no intention of making a scene. I had no interest in making Tyler feel cornered. But when I walked in, Preston was there. He was standing at the front desk going through what looked like printed spreadsheets. Tyler was in the back. The young woman at the front went pale when she saw me. Preston looked up. He said, "This isn't a good time, Shirley," I said. "My name is on the lease." He said, "We know." I placed my lawyer's letter on the desk in front of him. My lawyer's assistant set her copy down beside it. Preston looked at the documents without touching them. Something moved across his face, not guilt, exactly. Something more calculated than guilt. Like he was running numbers. Taylor came out from the back. She looked at me. She looked at the documents. She looked at her husband. She said, "Mom," I said, "you don't have to say anything right now," and I meant it. I wasn't there for a conversation. I had already had the conversation I needed to have, and it had happened in a lawyer's office in Mississauga with documents and a witness and a clear paper trail. Whatever Tyler needed to say to me, she could say it when she was ready. When Preston wasn't standing next to her with his hand on the spreadsheets and his tight little smile. Preston tried to speak. I turned to him and said, "I'd like you to direct any further communication to my lawyer." I gave him her card. He didn't take it. I set it on the desk. I walked through the salon, past the 4 chairs, the same 4 chairs that had been there since 1992, though they'd been reupholstered twice, past the wash stations, past the shelf unit that Earl had built. It was still there, slightly crooked on one side the way it had always been, because Earl was a better husband than he was a carpenter, and I had loved him for both of those things. I went into the back room, and I sat down at the small desk and I looked at the walls. Tyler came in about 5 minutes later. She closed the door behind her. Preston did not come in. I don't know what I expected from that conversation. What I got was a woman who looked exhausted and ashamed and much younger than her 36 years. She didn't make excuses, which surprised me. She said, "I let him talk me into something I knew wasn't right." She said it very quietly, like she'd been practicing it, and it still didn't fit right in her mouth. I asked her if she understood what could have happened. If the sale had gone through, if I had lost the lease, the business, the name I'd been building since she was 3 years old. She said she understood. I didn't tell her I forgave her. That would have been dishonest. I told her I needed time. I told her what happened next would depend on what she did next, not on what she said to me in this room. Preston left Tyler 8 months later. I don't know the details. She didn't offer them and I didn't ask. What I know is that she called me on a Tuesday in February, early morning, which meant she hadn't slept, and said she needed help. I said, "Come over." She came over. I made tea and I didn't say anything about the salon, and neither did she. We talked about other things and eventually we didn't talk at all, and she fell asleep on the couch in my living room under the blanket I'd had since 1995. I sat in the kitchen with my tea and the morning light coming through the window, and I thought about the salon. About the first morning I had opened it in 1992 in that strip mall in Brampton, with a second-hand cash register and 4 chairs I'd bought at auction and a sign my brother-in-law had painted by hand. About how afraid I had been that first day, about how no one had come in until 11 in the morning, and I had sat in one of the empty chairs and looked at my reflection in the mirror and said, out loud to no one, "You can do this." I had done it. For 30 years I had done it. The power of attorney was formally revoked in July 2022. The salon remained in my name. I hired a new manager the following spring, a woman in her 40s who had been in the industry for 20 years and had no interest in drama. Tyla did not return to the business at her own request. She found work elsewhere and, as far as I know, is doing all right. I still go in on Thursdays. I don't manage anymore. That's not my job now, but I sit in the back room sometimes with a coffee and the books just to look at them, to know that they're there, to know that what I built is still standing. The rosebush came back again this April, 30 years after Earl planted it, and it still comes back. I don't know how it does it. I stopped trying to understand it a long time ago. Some things just hold on.